So, yeah, how do you say your last name?
Bounkeua.
Bounkeua? Mm-hmm. Okay, I thought so, but I just thought, I better ask. Those are one of those polite things to just know.
Yes, it's a ton of vowels. It's my father is from
Okay. Now that's interesting.
Yeah.
So, I don't even know where to start. There's so many places that I want to go in this conversation. Like, how did you start playing violin would be maybe that's like the very beginning. Let's go to the beginning.
We can go to the beginning.
Okay.
Sure. So I was 4 years old, and it was actually really too small to hold an instrument, and so I had to beg my mother for 6 months. And so when I started playing finally, I actually didn't know how to read yet. I learned music before I learned how to read the alphabet. Mm-hmm. So I remember sitting in orchestra. I was in this tiny string player's orchestra in the very back with my quarter-size instrument, and I didn't know which piece we were supposed to turn to because I couldn't read the titles of the pieces. And so my mother would draw pictures at the top of each piece, so I knew where to turn. But yeah, she was always really supportive. My mother used to play violin when she was younger, so that was always super helpful. I know that so many folks who get into music when they have someone close in their family, it's just hugely supportive.
Yeah.
So I just fell in love with the instrument since I was 4 and started playing and really haven't stopped.
That's amazing. So you've been pretty single focused on it your whole life then, almost.
Yes, single focused is exactly the right word. Yes. Except for a very short span right after I graduated from the conservatory. But I think I needed a break. There was a point in time where it felt not joyous, and I think when we reach that as artists, it's always good to take a step back. And I did, and I came to Tucson and I started playing again in a very different way, and so now I'm still playing.
Yes, I really want to explore that different way in a moment here. So what were some of your good experiences while you were growing up in performance? Did you play in different little youth orchestras and maybe not little?
Yes, but I did. So I played for years with the local city high school orchestra, and actually one of my fondest memories, I was 15 and we had just learned that we were going to Carnegie Hall on tour that year, and I had never been to New York, and of course I was dreaming of New York. And I remember this trip so vividly because just a few months prior I had been gifted an instrument. I mean, violins are very, very expensive, and I often couldn't afford very nice instruments. But the instrument I was gifted was particularly special because it was from someone in the neighborhood who I believe he was a Vietnam veteran, and he never even played the instrument before. He never played violin, but he learned how to make instruments after he was injured, and it just was a passion for him. And I walked into his studio one day, and there were 16, 20 instruments that had never been played before. Wow. And I started going quite frequently and playing them for him, and as a gift he gifted me this instrument, and that was the instrument that I brought with me to Carnegie Hall, where I was sitting concertmaster and playing solos. So it was really wonderful to share that with him, and also for me to be there.
That brings a tear to my eye. That's a beautiful story.
I was very lucky.
Mm-hmm. And then you were concert mistress and concert master. Concert mistress.
Yeah. Essentially, that just means that I was sitting at the front of the section. I get to walk out on stage and tune the orchestra.
Right.
Which was, at 15, a really big deal. I was really excited. But I've been really lucky. I grew up in Albuquerque, New Mexico, and I was chosen to do a concerto with their professional symphony when I was very young. So I was maybe about 10 years old. That was my first sort of big solo performance with the orchestra.
Cool.
I did a Mozart G major violin concerto. And since then have done quite a few different touring projects, and I would say I have a ton of priceless memories with music in regards to to travel. I've been so many different places because of it. I did an opera festival in Italy. I did an orchestra festival in Brazil, 2 different occasions.
Wow,
I've gone to Mexico several times, and so lots of different places. Yeah.
Those are like really wonderful experiences and travel experiences. Did you get to like experience some of the culture while you were in these different places?
Yes. One of the first things that come to mind was after graduating music school, I had applied to a bunch of different fellowships, and I was accepted into an exchange program in London. So I went to live there for 6 months, and at that time I wasn't really performing classically, but I was invited to perform with a folk band.
Oh, nice.
And this was my first sort of venture into non-traditional classical world, and so they were based in London, but we were invited to do a folk festival, and it ended up being an international festival, and we were the headliners, and I had no idea, and I show up and I'm like this American playing with this UK band, and sort of, you know, fumbling. I'm definitely not a fiddle player, but we were doing some sort of Celtic pop fusion, and so we ended up touring all the way from the north of the UK down to the south of France.
Whoa, cool.
So, and there was one stop where we were busking outside, and we didn't have a busking permit, and the French police came, and the audience booed them away, and we got to play like 5 more songs, and then we had to leave. But yeah, priceless experience.
Oh, that is beautiful. What a memory that is. That is really cool.
Have you done any busking?
Very little.
No.
I was in Madrid, and I thought, okay, well, I'm going to go busk. And so I went and I did it in the train station for a minute. And then, you know, I made a few euros or whatever, but, you know, I was really nervous. And then I went to the park, you know, by myself. So I was around behind the bushes trying to...
Yes.
Not exactly a good place to busk.
Yeah. I always find when I'm playing by myself or I'm busking sort of impromptu performances, the easiest thing to do is find a location that super speaks to you, that is either really resonant or that you can just have a relationship with the space when you're playing.
I have a space on 4th Avenue I've gone to a few times.
Cool.
And yeah, so I've gotten beyond hiding behind the bushes.
Oh, great. No, that's great. Tucson is such a wonderful place to break out in that way. I think that's been my experience.
And it's a great practice. It's a great way of like...
It super is, actually.
Yeah.
I, even now, every other week, and when I can, I play for a small farmer's market.
Oh, yeah?
The Tucson CSA share at the Historic Y. It's every Tuesday and Wednesday, and I play for an hour.
Oh, nice.
When I can. So.
Well, I've been blown away by what a good practice it is. So that's interesting. So you started busking and you had this wonderful experience in London, and that was after you finished conservatory?
Yes, absolutely.
And then did you go... Now you went to, if I remember right, you said Oberlin?
Yes, Oberlin.
I know we didn't talk about it on the interview earlier.
My time there was invaluable. You know, I think everyone has different sort of traumatic experiences with music school. It's very, very competitive, but you know, also in the most invigorating way. You're playing 8 hours a day, if not more. You're practicing until 1 a.m. in your practice room, and you have buddies next door that you're comparing practice notes with, and for the last 2 years at Oberlin, my focus really was contemporary music. So by that I mean contemporary classical, Western, atonal, sort of noise-driven, including electronics, a lot of 12-tone pieces, and that ended up being my niche. I think I felt like I was really able to use the violin in non-traditional ways that were really interesting to me.
So where I was going with that was that after conservatory you had a period of time where you didn't really play.
Yes.
Yeah. Did you go back to Albuquerque at that point, or
no? So that was I went to London and came back, and I joined actually an AmeriCorps program. Are you familiar with them?
A what program?
AmeriCorps.
Oh, yeah.
It's a volunteer program.
Yeah. Okay.
And it had started with when I was my last years in conservatory, I was getting tired of performing in like a really academic setting for the same peers and the same music, and there was just a lot of self-judgment and criticism, and so I really wanted to break out of that habit, and so I set up a series of concerts in the Cleveland area, performing in non-traditional venues, actually performing at nursing homes and homeless shelters, and I loved it so much that I actually ended up being really interested in making nonprofit work more of my passion. So
okay.
Yeah, so I when I went to London, it was a program that was an exchange program working with adults with serious mental illness. And so while I was playing in a folk band, I was actually living and working at this center in London. And then when I came back to the States, decided to pursue sort of my interest in nonprofit organizations. I joined AmeriCorps, which was 10,000 hours of volunteer service.
It's a big commitment.
Yeah, and then helped me with my student loans, and then afterwards found a job in Tucson working at the clubhouse here, which works with adults with serious mental illness. So
what is a clubhouse?
The clubhouse is it's a center for folks with mental illness to go and volunteer, and it's really a model. It's an international model of building self-worth and recovery through active and meaningful engagement in something. It's a peer-run organization, and I absolutely loved it. Loved it. There are models all over the world. So I did that for quite a few years. But then as I started doing and picking up more music in Tucson, that sort of had to make a bit of a choice.
Yeah, it is a choice. I understand completely.
Yeah. So I'm no longer doing that, but it was a huge part of my life. Yeah.
And that was probably, that's such a good, it feels like that was a really good choice. It feels like for, people to really branch out and really get a sense of their humanity and the humanity of other people and stuff. Because I know that silo of being in the whole music thing and how that can just be so, just so insular, and you don't really...
Yes.
You don't really experience a whole lot of the rest of the world in a way.
Correct. Yeah, exactly.
So you got a real good, you got an eye-opening experience, I'm sure. It sounds like the club and being able to help people who have such mental illnesses and stuff sounds like a very...
absolutely. It's so humbling. And I met such wonderful people through it. Who I'll never forget, for sure.
So back to music, though. You kind of gave it up for a while, but you probably never stopped playing, my guess. But what kind of started piquing your interest and drawing you back into the music?
That's a good question. Well, there are two people in my life in Tucson who have been hugely influential. The first is, her name is Elizabeth Cherry, and I actually met her while working at the clubhouse. She was a volunteer there, and she heard that I was a violinist, and she in herself is sort of a Tucson legend, and has run many art galleries and was very involved with MoCA, and she invited me to perform one day at like a brunch at her house, and I hadn't played for like a year, and I felt pretty resistant, and she introduced me to her partner, Olivier Mosse, who is actually an incredibly internationally known conceptual artist. And you're
actually, I met him.
Okay. Yeah,
I did a little mini interview which I haven't published yet.
Oh yeah, he's wonderful, and I kind of consider him one of my idols, and he's been incredibly influential, and he sat me down and was like, what you need to do is you need to practice. And it was like that simple, and I was like, okay. So I started playing, and I think I was pretty new to Tucson, so my entry into the music community was really kind of accidental. I was standing in a bar I think it was Tap and Bottle, and this band was playing called Jimmy Carr and the Awkward Moments, and someone in the band knew that I played violin, and someone in the band happened to bring an extra violin with them. And I had never heard them before, and they asked me to come play with them. And I had never really done that kind of improvising before, but I did. And started playing with them and played with them for years.
Wow.
Yeah.
Cool. So that was your introduction to improvisation. Is that what you're saying?
In a tonal sense, yes.
Okay.
Yeah. I think I did a lot of improvising atonally, so sort of like that classical contemporary aspect, which is completely different.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, completely different. But yeah, I think it was with that band with Jimmy Carr. They're kind of are you familiar with them? Mm-mm. They're sort of like a New Orleans style gypsy. Jimmy plays accordion and writes some original songs. I do have a track if you want to listen to it later, but it's it was really with them that I was able to maybe let go of some stuff classically in order to free up to be able to even consider what improvising might mean. It was very, very, very scary, but very exhilarating.
It's exciting. Yeah. It's exhilarating.
Totally.
Improv. I remember when I discovered it, it was mind-blowing.
Yeah.
Changed my world, changed my life.
Yes, exactly. That's why I'm here.
I know, right?
Yeah.
So you started playing with this band, and you started doing improvisation and learning about tonally. I like how you make the distinction between tonally and atonally. So what you were telling me is that is what kind of drew you back into music, kind of drew you back into playing, into practicing. So this artist, Olivier said practice.
Yes. Exactly like that. It was very simple. Yeah, I mean, I think, and then after that, a series of things happened, and I think it has everything to do with how supportive the Tucson community is. I was offered sort of my first public performance in Tucson by an organization called Casa Libre, which is actually a literary arts organization.
Okay.
I performed on one of their sort of performance art series in a courtyard, and with Jimmy Carr actually. And I remember he brought an amp with him, and his technique was to shake the amp and make some feedback that sounded very alien, and it was a really fun performance. And I loved it. So and sort of like one thing led to another, and then I was suddenly invited into like 3 or 4 different bands and projects. The one that I'm still playing with today very regularly is called Two Door Hatchback.
Okay.
And that's a group with Dante Rosano and Marco Rosano. Are you familiar with the Rosanos?
I haven't met them yet.
Yeah, they're sort of like local jazz buffs.
Oh, wow. I can't wait to meet them.
And Dante does this incredibly charming, he has this small keyboard that he puts on the back of his 2-door hatchback, and he brings it to every gig. So he straps it. So we have a live piano when we're playing always, and it's got this rag feel.
You mean an upright piano?
An upright piano. He straps it to the back of his car. That's why we're called 2-door hatchback, is because.
Oh my gosh.
Yes. So
isn't that kind of heavy?
Yes. Oh, yeah. No, he put it on wheels. He rigged it up.
Yeah, right.
He also plays trumpet, and he can do this thing where he plays trumpet and piano at the same time.
Oh, wow.
And his brother, who's actually, they're part of identical, his identical twin.
Okay.
Dante's part of triplets, actually.
Oh, wow.
And all 3 of them play music. But his brother Marco plays a million different instruments, tours with Sergio Mendoza.
Oh my gosh.
But he plays guitar in this group and clarinet.
Wow.
So, and we do these wonderful songs that Dante writes that are super whimsical and very rag and jazz based, but go in a different direction. And it's been huge for me to play with musicians like Dante and Marco, because it's always about playing with folks who are better than you.
Yes. That's the best way to learn.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. So,
so should we take a moment and listen to one of these songs? Is this one of the pieces that you might have queued up?
Actually, I don't have a song from Two-Door Hatchback because Dante is he's so hesitant in making this album. We're working on it though. Okay. So, but I do have a song from early on. This was recorded maybe 3 or 4 years ago from Jimmy Carr.
Oh, let's let's listen to it.
Okay, yeah.
And action. Yes, sir!
That must have been a lot of fun playing in that band.
Yes, that was a live recording that we did.
Nice. Yeah, I could tell. Clapping at the end. Good job.
Thank you.
Yeah, so you really did get a good handle on then some more hoedown type of.
Yes, I know, but it was very forgiving because I don't know, gypsy, sort of like this gypsy, edgy. I was really able to bring like some of my classical things into it and have it not stand out too much. Yeah, I think that was always kind of one of my fears.
So cool. So that was an early iteration, and then now you're playing with Two-Door Hatchback and a couple other people too.
Yeah. So actually, one of the biggest projects that I took on was a band called Half Broke Town.
Okay.
And Half Broke Town was my band, you could say. Oh, okay. So I wrote a lot of the music for it, and I sort of picked the players, and we were together for about a year, maybe a little bit more, and it was definitely my passion project. And in this group, it was a completely different sound, and I do have a track I can play for you, but it's a lot of the things that I was doing in this group, because I was writing the music, was I was holding my violin like a guitar and pitsing the harmony parts, sort of like like a guitarist was. Very Andrew Bird-esque. I'm not sure if you're familiar with Andrew Bird.
Andrew Bird?
Yeah, Andrew Bird is the traveling artist who has made his way as a violin looper, and he does this technique quite often. And so I wrote quite a few songs for this, and then after that, what else? I've been playing very often with a group called Chamber Lab. Are you familiar with them? Right.
You mentioned it. It's a classical group, right? Or how does it go?
Yes.
Tell me about it.
So Chamber Lab is founded by Chris Black, and it's a program, really. And Chris would essentially ask non-classical musicians to try their hand at writing classical music. Then he would hire classical musicians, i.e. me, and then he would perform. He would stage them in non-classical venues like Club Congress.
Wow.
And each show had a different theme to it. So, I actually very recently, just a few weeks ago, had a show with him where I was playing at Club Congress, and we were playing music, and as we were playing, Joe Pajic, the famous mural artist in Tucson, was painting to our music.
Nice.
The show was called Synesthesia, so there was this sort of call and response of visual art and music. But Chris has done tons of projects. He's done scores to Buster Keaton films, and so I got involved with this project relatively early when I came to Tucson. It definitely sort of fit like my sort of rebellion against classical music, but actually I love it sort of thing that I had going and that I still have going. And so I started playing with him right off the bat.
So rebellion against, well, before we go through there, do you have any tracks from that or anything? Or?
Well, I actually have a track from Half Broke Town that I can play. So this song is it's called Lover's High, and it's a piece. You can find it on YouTube. It was done in Jim Waters' studio. But yeah, it's called Lover's High, and it's got Aaron Henderson on vocals, and this is from my old band.
Okay, I'd love to hear it.
Okay, great.
Yeah, absolutely.
thirsty and like a sip of whiskey. Water's all you got within your reach. You're breathing through your pillow and your breathing's getting shallow, 'cause you're feeling kinda weak. You began to murmur as you toss and turn. I know I heard you say my name. No, I heard it more than once or twice. I know you won't remember in the morning, but it might have been the sweetest fucking moment of my life. And you know it might have been the sweetest fucking dream of mine. It might have been the sweetest. Baby, I want you to go to sleep. I'm here with you tonight. And I'm laying down at your feet, shooting up the lover's high. Baby, there's still time to sleep. There's no agenda to keep, nowhere to be. So just slip to me. There's still time to sleep. There's still time. There's still time
That's very beautiful. I really like that a lot.
Thanks. Yeah, I think
Yeah.
there are a couple words in there that I'm not sure.
Oh yeah, I couldn't hear the words, all of them. Are there any bad words?
I
in
think there were a couple, so we might have to-
Uh-oh.
yeah.
Shoot. I'll have to go through and maybe, just sort of mute those out a little.
Yeah, or maybe we.
No, I was so into listening to the musical aspect of it. I'm not very good at hearing words.
Yeah,
I just
no, me
confess.
neither.
You either?
No, I can't remember
good.
words ever.
I have a hard time remembering them too.
Or hearing them. No, I feel the same.
So, but I am curious. So how would you describe your writing process?
Yeah, that's such a great question. I think it completely depends on what I'm writing for.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll give you just a couple examples of like some starkly different projects that I was involved in. So one project recently, this last fall, I was asked to accompany an experimental performance artist from Mexico as part of the Binational Encuentro. That was sort of a 10-day series of workshops and performances about a commentary about the border experience for women.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it's called Female Migrations.
Oh, wow.
And so this artist I had never met before, never worked with her before. And she was coming to do like the finale event. And her concept was, the piece was called Sugar Stains. And she was using sugar as a metaphor of, touch and the texture and what it can do to your skin in terms of healing and not healing. And so knowing nothing about her, nothing about the piece, really having very little communication, she requested to work with a musician and I was asked. And so I was like, okay, I'm just going to go with this. And so I ended up doing a lot of in-depth research, but I wanted to create a sound or a texture that was emoted that experience or that metaphor of sugar. So I literally took a bag of sugar and I recorded it falling onto a piece of elevated corrugated metal. And I sort of experimented with all the different sounds that that could have. And there's, a lot of scraping. There's actually a lot of thumping when like hard sugar rocks would fall and sort of like this thing that became, if you hit the metal really hard, it was like very violent and then you can swoosh the sugar. And so I experimented a lot with that, and I ended up using a track that I put together based on those sounds, combined with sort of this looping melody that I took that was very influenced by an old Mexican folk song. So in terms of process, I think, it's like it completely depends on what you're writing for. So that was one of my, that's sort of how I put together one project. But another project, I work very often with actually with poets and with writers, and I do a lot of I guess you could say underscoring for them, collaborations, I want to say. Actually, my partner, Kristen Nelson, is an author, and I performed and toured with her very recently all over the Pacific Coast for her new book. Cool. Yeah, and she's very sort of known in the community for doing these kind of grandiose collaborations. We had her finale at her book release was Aerial Silks and Electronic Violin, and her reading her final piece, and it was all choreographed, and I wrote the music for that. Wow. And that, when you're writing with text-based work, I think, I had all these discussions about color, like what is this, what color does this emote, and how does that translate to a certain melody or a certain harmonic key or a certain texture of sound.
Wow. Yeah.
Does that explain a little bit?
Yeah, no, that's really cool.
Yeah.
And then, I was also thinking of Half Broke Town. You said those were songs that you wrote,
yes,
and everything, and that's more popular.
Yes.
Maybe.
Yeah. No. Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. Very much so. And I think it was like, I think it was, how do I use this instrument, which is not really, in popular culture as much.
Not as much.
And how do I make that work for me? How do I just sort of blur the lines of all the boxes, and I think that's kind of still what I'm figuring out. So, yeah.
And you also wrote the words, I'm assuming.
I did.
The lyrics.
I did. Which was, and so working with words, it's so helpful to have a singer in mind that you're working with. I've done a lot of projects with Erin, and she and I are actually the lead vocalist of that track, and she and I are actually working on an album together right now. That's going to be like just a duo sort of loop violin and voice album, which is cool.
Sweet. And so that does sort of lead into, I think.
Yeah.
This, how did you say it a minute ago? This rebellion from classical music, and you have a new name coming out.
Yes. Yeah. It's a stage persona. Yeah. So I recently launched my new artist name brand. It's called Rogue Violin.
I love it.
Thank you. I'm trying to go by RV for short. So, and I think Rogue Violin is really more sort of my attempt to merge like all of the different things I do. I'm part of so many different projects, and I'm so grateful to have had the classical training that I did for the 20 years that I had it. But I do want to break away from it without running away from it. And I think I'm trying to
explain what you think.
I'm not sure exactly what that means. I think it's as a classical musician, there's a lot of rules around playing and sort of preconceived notions of what a violinistic sound means, and it's based on hundreds and hundreds of years of really like white male violinists and composers telling you this is how you should sound, and and I am going to be honest, I love that sound. I fell in love with it. That's why I started playing violin, but I think it's also so much more. And I think musically, I wanted to. I just felt really tied tied to that. My hands were tied. And so I think
right.
this new stage name, Rogue Violin, is like the exploration of self coming out of that, 10 years after conservatory and still figuring it out. And, the allowance of that to happen, so.
Well, I think that's a wonderful name.
Thank you.
And a great concept too. I think the concept of breaking out from the strictures of confinement, of these rules of, all the habits and the best practices and the what's another word? What's the word I'm really looking for? I can't think of it. But anyway, to be able to expand the boundaries and bring things into a different space, which. Well, I do think they were trying to do that a lot with the 12 tone and the serial writing.
Oh,
and
absolutely.
That kind of stuff
I know that is definitely influenced this greatly.
So is that a big influence for you then?
It is, yeah. It always has been. I think it's a matter of how you listen to music.
Mm-hmm.
It's you hearing instead of just melody, but hearing texture and articulations, and John Cage's idea of music being in sort of everything you hear. It's just a matter of your choice to perceive it that way, and how you listen.
Yeah, what's that one song?
3 minutes and something seconds. Yeah.
Right.
The famous one. Yeah.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
But also the prepared piano and all that stuff.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
To create the different types of sounds.
Yes. Yes.
And then you're experimenting with using, like you were talking about the sugar and recording those sounds of what the sugar was doing when it hit the tin
Yes,
roof,
yes.
and squishing it around and all that.
Right.
And that makes me think of Bjork.
I'm such a fan. Absolutely. I am recently, in the last, I want to say 2 years, have been really working a lot with electronics and violin, and so using even guitar pedals to distort the way that a violin sounds. But recently using this production program, Ableton Live, to immediately sort of have control over sound. You're just live producing your sound. So.
And so live producing the sound, live producing loops, live producing, I don't see any pedals.
No, I don't have any out right now. Most of it is Ableton right now.
So I'm going to tell you guys, we're sitting in Samantha's studio right now talking about music and her experiences, and I'm looking around and I see an amp and I see some great monitors and a couple guitars, the mandolin, it looks like.
Yep, 2 mandolins.
Yeah.
Bass amp.
And
too many things. Yes. I used to
no guitar pedals.
They're not out right now. But I used to show up at a show and I would only bring my violin, and everything else would be set up for me, and I would just play with the microphone. And it was because I didn't know. I just didn't have all of the tech stuff. I just didn't. And so gradually over the years, I've acquired look around all of these chords, these microphones. I have a pickup installed on my violin. I actually play on 2 different instruments. So
I was going to ask you about that. Yeah.
This isn't my classical instrument. I play with a pickup that's installed actually in the bridge.
Oh, is it? Okay.
And I, this is the instrument that I can afford to take to bars, and
yes,
I can't do that with my other instrument.
Do you still have the instrument you got from the man?
I do still have it. Yeah.
Is that your primary classical instrument?
It's not anymore.
Okay.
No.
All right.
No, but I still keep it around. Yeah.
Nice. So let's go into the looping a little bit. Or is there any other track that you wanted to play for us on something that you had queued up already?
No, I'm happy. No, I'm happy to go straight into the.
Okay. Well, I mean, if you have something, I don't want to ignore that.
Yeah, I mean, there was one. There's one track that I brought up that was very recent. It's a recording from my time with the Rogue Theater. I played with them for the entire month of January, and it was very special.
What is the Rogue Theater?
So the Rogue Theater is a local theater company, and I was asked to join their production of Much Ado About Nothing.
Okay.
We had, it's incredibly intense runs where you have weeks where you do, I think the whole month I played like 30 renditions of the shows. It was a lot. But the composer who worked on this show, his name is Russell Rannenbaum, and he is a good friend of mine now. We sort of met doing this show. He's a pianist, a classically trained pianist and composer, and I'm such a fan of his work. And so I actually brought up this track as kind of an example of the fact that I still am connected to classical, and because he's quite rooted in classical composing, but this is a particular track. It's a very short one, based on one of the scenes in this play. The
I would
Shakespeare
love
play.
to hear it.
Okay, all right.
I really
I'm gonna
would.
play that.
Bravo. That was beautiful.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was a very passionate scene where one of the main characters finds out that his lover has been disloyal, which is not actually true. But the title of that track is "Lover is Disloyal," and Russ just recently put out an entire album of music from this show.
Wow.
So
that's a beautiful,
Thank you.
evocative
Thank
piece,
you.
and you played it gorgeously.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks.
All right. Oh, thank you for playing for that for us, because I think it really helps to show that there's so many facets to what you're doing right now, that the classical isn't gone, the folk stuff is there, the rock and roll stuff, and now the Rogue. I'm really curious about the Rogue. So,
Yeah.
like bringing it to like the most exciting part, maybe.
Well, so I have a show that I've been preparing for. It's this Sunday, July 7th.
Okay.
7 to 9 p.m. at Shay's Lounge. And it's called An Exploration of Solo Loop Music. This was organized by Julia Schlossberg, who's an incredible musician in town. And I feel super, super thrilled to be on this bill, because it's kind of with all of the folks in Tucson who I super, super admire, and who are also kind of done this work and who are way more experienced at it actually than I am. So I'm playing with Julius will be performing some of his work. He's a drum set player and he loops his own synths. And Jillian Bissett is also going to be performing, and she has an incredible way of creating a deceptively simple loop, but just a beautiful sound, beautiful voice, incredible arrangements. Super inspired by her work. And then Vicki Brown, who I have always wanted to play on a show with. Vicki Brown is sort of a Tucson iconic violinist.
Really?
Yes, and we're also both very interested in different sort of experimental things, and so it's going to be fascinating to see her approach. I think she's definitely, it's going to be completely different. She's using a loop pedal, I imagine, and lots of effects via sort of that kind of gear. And I am, for the first time, performing with this production program, in which I've never done before and which is very new for me, called Ableton. And so I've essentially routed 32 different clips on this drum pad over here, and
Wow.
any time I can trigger recording that and playing it back and trigger an effect to go on top of that clip. So it's
Wow.
so it's a massive juggling thing, which
Yeah.
I haven't totally figured out, but it's got tons of potential. I'm really excited about it. So
Okay, so I want to get our hands wet on that.
You wanna hear some of that?
Yeah, I do.
Okay.
I totally do. I was like, I'm really fascinated.
okay, great. So I'm gonna give this piece a try. It's a piece that was written just a couple weeks ago, and it was like on an online forum that I'm part of, which meets for an hour at a time, and you get 1 hour to compose a song from start to finish. And they give you a prompt, and the prompt for this piece was something along the lines of the clock is broken. The clock is broken.
Okay.
Something along those lines. And so this was based on that prompt, and we'll see how it goes.
All right.
Okay.
Fabulous. Wow. That is amazing. So I'm watching you trigger the different, you said those are drum pad sets,
Yes, so
thing.
essentially it's a MIDI controller, and there's 16 little drum pads, and then 4 different variations that I can set that to. So 16 times 4 possibilities of hitting buttons and recording clips and turning them on and off. And so the thing about looping is once you hit that button, there is no going back. It just like goes on forever, and it's there's nothing more humbling.
That is so cool. It sounds beautiful too. I mean, it's really cool. I love that. I especially liked where you did that one thing where you went higher and higher and higher.
Yeah,
that building of that, the building of the excitement.
Good.
Wow, that is just amazing. So you're going to be playing on Sunday.
Mm-hmm. It's 7 to 9 at Shay's Lounge.
7 to 9 at Shay's. And so we definitely need to. I definitely need to try to make it. I mean, I really do want to make it. But
Thank you.
Any way possible, I want to be there.
Thank you.
I
Hopefully,
have to
this
go
is the first of many.
Many,
so
yes.
It's always a little scary, but I'm very much looking forward to it.
So I'm curious. I finally remembered the name of the cellist, that Zoe Keating.
Oh, I'm not super familiar with her work.
Okay.
Yeah,
because she uses,
Ableton Live.
Ableton, I think so. Cool. And then she's got a foot pedal.
Yes, and that's something I need very much, because you saw me trying to sort of like hold my violin underneath my neck and press these pads at the same time. Yeah, no, it's a lot of juggling, but foot pedals would definitely be.
They would be nice.
They would be helpful. Should definitely get some. But that's the thing. I also want like so many things. Once you go down this road, there's no going back.
I know.
It's horrifying.
It's true. Well, I'm totally inspired, because I actually recently got a looping pedal machine, Voice Live 3 Extreme.
Yeah, great.
And I haven't really explored it. It's still sitting on the harpsichord, believe it or not. It's sitting on the harpsichord.
Do you play harpsichord?
No, not me.
Oh, but it's a great sound.
Yeah, no, my mom plays a little bit, but no, I grew up playing cello.
Oh, okay.
And then, but I grew up in a classical family. My mom's a violinist also.
Okay.
And so we all had to play.
Yeah.
And I chose cello. That was my first love. So what is your dream? What's your dream next purchase?
Oh, gosh. I would really like an Ableton Push, which is also a MIDI controller, but it's specifically designed to sync with the program. And essentially what that would allow me to do, I think, is just have you're building your own instrument, because the way that the program works, you're assigning each sound, each variable, each effect, each track to wherever you want it, and you can assign it like incredibly quickly, so you can really rebuild and change these parameters. But then once you do that, you have to remember what they are, right? And that's the trick, is like so I think that would be the thing that would allow me to build something that's super user friendly, and that I could adapt to whatever I need. I'm really exploring sound sampling right now, and so like incorporating recordings that I'm taking even from interviews or from the news or from speakers that I find incredibly inspiring, and sampling that into the songs. I think there's huge history of doing that in hip hop and lots of genres, but this is definitely super genre defying and very experimental. So I'm taking recordings from Brene Brown or from Bell Hooks, and putting them into different songs.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, unless you want to do another one.
I think that's all I got today.
Right. Yeah. So, well, thank you. Yeah. Thank you so much for spending time with me and talking with me about your journey as a violinist, your journey from time of being 4 years old.
Thank you. Yeah.
Growing up in Albuquerque and going off to the conservatory, and how your whole approach has evolved and morphed and had all these different influences. So it's really cool.
Thank you. I so appreciate it. Thank you for inviting me on here. And If anybody would like to learn more about it, you can visit my website. It's www.rogueviolin.com. So pretty easy.
Thank you. Any place else they can find you?
Oh, Facebook, Instagram. It's all Rogue Violin.
Hey, so you've got it all rebranded.
I've got it. Yeah, it's all lined up. I just gotta get cranking. Yeah, Instagram is great. Yeah.
Great. Yeah. Thank you for telling us where to find you.
Yeah.
That's a really good thing for all of us to know, because I'm sure there are a lot of people listening right now who really are curious about finding out more and hearing you.
Thank you.
So thanks.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.